During the summer, I decided to go with my friend Damien to his late grandmother's house in Texas. He had asked me to go because it would have been too painful to stay at his grandmother's, to whom he was raised by, house alone. The house was built in the 1900s and had been owned by two previous owners before Damien's grandmother, a farmer and his wife, who had died shortly after purchasing the house, and a lost family whose file was available. This made me paranoid, since I believed in paranormal things like ghosts and haunted things. But Damien convinced me that it was nothing. They probably just got a file in the fire or something. Don't think about it too much, he had told me, trying to make me feel better about going on a trip. I had agreed in haste, but uncertainty was still there. We soon reached the old farmhouse, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. The building wasn't much to look like, and it was made of wood, which was rotting from age, a deck which had been replaced and repaired, and looked new. But the rest of the building looked desolated and decomposed. The windows were broken, and those who weren't broken were covered in green mold-like substances that smelled musty and disgusting. Damien smiled weakly at me, and I sighed. Grabbing my stuff and bringing it inside, the door creaked loudly as I opened it, and I got stuck when it was only halfway open, so I had kicked it open. "This place is a dump," I had mumbled as I walked in. The inside worse than the outside, the wallpaper was peeling off at the rotting wood. Some of the floorboards were broken, cracked, or sticking out of place. The furniture was soaked by the molding and molded over, and some of the fabric was torn. Out of everything in the room, there was one thing that truly caught my eye. Amongst the rubble and discorded, a black piano in the corner of the room. It had flowers hand-carved into the painted wood. The keys were pure white and black, and it seemed to be in almost perfect condition. "What's that?" I asked Damien as we walked in. He had looked at the piano and smiled gentle but unsure, as if he was trying to find a way to explain it. Soon he had taken a deep breath and explained to me what it was. As I was willing to explain, my curiosity and desire for the piano started to grow. He told me that the piano had been there since my grandmother had lived in the house. Yet she never moved it. The previous owners never gave it to anyone in their will when they died. But what was stranger than that was the fact that no one in Damien's family had ever played or touched the piano. Almost as if it was insignificant, like it was nothing more than a speck of dust in an arid desert. I asked him more and more questions, most of them revolving about the piano in the house. My curiosity was taking its toll, and Damien soon became annoyed and stopped answering my questions. He took me to the spare bedroom since he was taking his grandmother's room. Then we unpacked and settled into our home for a few weeks. That night, when me and Damien were watching television in the living room, my eyes kept wandering towards the old piano in the corner. Damien wasn't paying attention to me because the TV was on. I stood up and slowly walked towards the piano. I stroked the keys, which felt oddly cold even though the piano was close to the fireplace, which was burning a blazing inferno. I pressed down one of the keys gently, but no sound came out. I pushed a little harder. Still, however, no sound came out. I got frustrated and started pressing multiple keys, trying to get a sound out of it. But I couldn't do it. I sighed and walked to the room. Frustrated by the piano, I went to the spare room and went to sleep in the uncomfortable bed. That night I woke up to scratching noises on the wall. It was quiet but distant, I sat up in my bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was cold, colder than it should have been at the moment. I stood up, my heart racing from something I couldn't explain. A feeling of terror, perhaps. My adrenaline was pumping as I walked out of the room. I kept a close eye on the surroundings around me. I heard a gentle playing at the piano. It wasn't very loud or obnoxious. It was playing 3 keys, being played over and over. The piano sounded sad, even though not much is being played. I walked into the living room and saw a little girl dressed in an old white gown. She said nothing, but she wasn't playing the piano with a melancholy look on her face. As I watched her, I got lost in her sorrowful face. I almost didn't know the music, suddenly getting more violent and wrathful. Soon she slammed her hands on the keyboard and everything went silent. I held my breath as I watched her get up from the bench and turn to me. She stayed silent, and so did I. She raised her arm slowly and scratched on the wall gently. I kept my eyes on her in the corner of my eye, and I saw what she was doing. She carved "Get Out" on the wall. I took my eyes away from her and looked at the wall as she let out a blood-curdling scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed with fear. She backed up and mumbled something in an unknown language, and left the house without another word. I never saw her again after that, but the next day the house burned down. Damien and I left the property and never spoke of it again. The only thing that survived the fire was an old piano. No one questioned it, and no one got rid of it. It just sits in the rubble, waiting for the next person to touch it and summon its lone player.